interest and motivation in this space was that over those three and a half years, I felt like I was making really great progress, right? I had unearthed this childhood trauma. I was becoming more patient, more empathetic. And so I thought I was making really great progress. But it was about a year and a half ago now that I was lucky enough to stumble upon some real experts in this space. And I made more progress in the space of a few weeks working with them than I had in the three and a half years prior.
And welcome to another episode of Carpe Diem Living the Podcast. I am your host, Shane Gitmed, and today we are traveling all the way to Thailand, our first guest that's located on the other side of the world. And I'm really happy and excited to introduce Jonathan, that's going to be able to tell us about plant medicine, the benefits, and retreats that he is a founder of. So Jonathan, take it away and tell us about just a little bit more about you and Behold Retreats.
Sure. Thank you, Shane. And a real pleasure to be here. So for me personally, this journey started about 5 years ago. And at the time I was working for Accenture Strategy, the consulting firm. And honestly speaking, I had a pretty good life. I had a pretty successful career. I was leading a large team, had a loving girlfriend. I was living in Hong Kong, having a great life there. It's a pretty vibrant and energetic city, but I was working a lot, and I just reached a point where I felt like there must be more to life. I didn't really know why. I didn't really know what I was looking for, but I just felt that, do I chase another client? Do I chase another promotion? Is there something more? And at the time I was actually an atheist, and decided to take a year off, and spent most of that year traveling around South America. And as part of that, found my way to an ayahuasca retreat in Peru. With a couple of buddies of mine. It was a life-changing experience. It opened up the door to spirituality, to self-discovery. I was able to, not during that retreat, but in subsequent work, I was able to uncover previously repressed childhood trauma, which is very common for people who pursue this work. And it really showed me a lot of my own limiting beliefs. It showed me a lot of my limiting behavior. And it also showed me the impact that I can have, beautiful and not so beautiful, upon the lives of others. And so it was a very humbling experience. It was a very eye-opening experience, spirit-opening experience. And that was really just the beginning, as it were. Again, for me, it was such a profound experience, but I didn't want to be one of those people who quickly jumps into this space. And so that really, I did return to the corporate world thereafter, but spent the overwhelming majority of my time kind of understanding this space more deeply, and also attending more retreats. So, over the first three and a half years since that first one, I had attended, a handful, 8 to 10 retreats around the globe. And now what really redoubled my interest and motivation in this space was that over those three and a half years, I felt like I was making really great progress, right? I had unearthed this childhood trauma. I was becoming more patient, more empathetic. Those were definitely two areas that required development, shall we say, while I was in the corporate world. And so I thought I was making really great progress. But it was about a year and a half ago now that I was lucky enough to stumble upon some real experts in this space. And I made more progress in the space of a few weeks working with them than I had in the three and a half years prior. And so again, that just really turbocharged my motivation. And also, through the mentorship that they've provided, they've been able to help me understand a lot of the common mistakes in relation to this work. And so, honestly speaking, like, I've had a pretty good corporate career. So moving into this space, the motivations are not primarily commercial. The motivations are really to help people make rapid progress in a short space of time so that they can really elevate their consciousness. And I'm happy to, elevating consciousness sounds like a bit of an abstract subject to many, but it's really not. And so, I think that's a topic I'd love to dive into more deeply.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, I just love that it's all about self-discovery. And, we all have things from our past that, yeah, limiting beliefs, things from our childhood. And for me personally, like, I'm such a, and this goes back to like my human design research. I'm such an investigator. So like, if there's anything at all that could just like help me broaden my mind or, really tap into my subconscious, I'm all about that. So I just think it's great when you start your journey thinking like, okay, like I'm making this great progress, and then you go to the next level. And how great that you got to, connect with experts in this, because not a lot of people have that. They just kind of like rely on the internet, or they go to retreat and it's one and done. So I think that's really interesting that you had, that time and experience with people that can really guide you through the process. Like I said, I'm definitely going to try that eventually when the world is a little bit better about traveling. How does the process look as far as being able to attend a retreat?
And so I'll walk you through this in relation to what I now recognize are the common mistakes. There's a series that I see, and it's probably a little bit long to dive into each of them, but in a broad sense, often people are diving into doing this work because they've heard about the really profound benefits, but they don't really have meaningful motivations for themselves. They know they want to benefit, but they're not quite sure how or why. And so I think it's important for people to really do their own research, recognize the different benefits, experiences, not to have expectations too much, but just so that they can understand their own motivations for themselves. And then second to that, it's, we really do emphasize safety and legality, right? Gratefully, this work is becoming more socially acceptable and also legally as well. There's lots of, movements that are being made and successfully, getting decriminalization and legalization, which is beautiful. But certainly, it's not worth, taking the risk. There's still a lot of crackdowns that are taking place, unfortunately. Safety is often assumed. So, you find a retreat center, they've got a nice website, they've got some great reviews. Great, well, it sounds good. Unfortunately, because this work is happening in an unregulated context, each of the retreat centers are effectively left to their own devices to decide what's right and wrong from a safety perspective. Now, don't get me wrong, the overwhelming majority of people who work in this place do take safety seriously. But again, it's worth recognizing that each of these small individual businesses can't necessarily spend the time, the money, the energy in order to keep up with the latest and greatest in terms of contraindicated medications, whatever research is coming out from the leading institutions, et cetera. It's quite an overhead that often they're not able to stay on top of. So those are the first three that I would talk about. And then in terms of stepping into how an actual journey works, right? So, okay, I'm ready. I want to pursue this. Preparation is so important. One of the big mistakes that we see is that people are bypassing or skipping the mental and emotional work. So you find a retreat center, you click, you book it for a few months' time. Life is really busy, so you go back to life, right? And okay, now you're a week out, you've got to sign all these forms. You quickly sign all these forms. Maybe you read these few really long emails that they've sent you, on your way to the airport or even on the flight. And then you get to the retreat center. You try and set some intentions for yourself. Try and maybe do some breathing practices to settle in, and then boom, you're kind of off to your retreat and your ceremony. It turns out that pretty much all of us have mental and emotional blind spots, and pretty much all of us have traumatic experiences from earlier in life. And it's even those of us who are privileged, right? So the example I sometimes give is, imagine you're with mom at the end of a long day. You're age 5, and she picked you up at the end of her long day at work, and it's been a bad one, stuck in traffic, and you go shopping together, and you're walking into the house at say 8 p.m. at the end of a long day, and in that moment you drop some groceries and it breaks out onto the floor. And in that moment of weakness, mom says, "Oh, you never get anything right, just get out of the way." And so for a 5-year-old, it's not possible to actually distinguish between that which is mom at the end of a long day versus that which takes hold in the subconscious. And so that can take hold in the subconscious of a child. And the next day, the child at school gets the ball, and in that moment, that tape plays back to itself, right? It's you never get anything right, just get out of the way. Child passes the ball, all of a sudden that's become a self-fulfilling cycle in the child's life, and fundamentally sets the child on a different growth trajectory in who knows how many ways, right? Now, obviously, I think we can recognize that's not a particularly traumatic event. We've all been through worse than that, right? When we were children. And so, we've got this intergenerational trauma dynamic, which is playing out. And so, yeah, we've all got kind of suppressed and repressed memories that often come up through these experiences. And so, to some extent, what we're doing is regaining the coherence of the brain by reaccessing these early traumatic experiences. And, it's common for people to ask, well, why would I want to go relive that? Well, as it turns out, these early life experiences are, of course, manifesting in your character, right? So for me personally, I was often easily frustrated or impatient, or maybe a little too quick to anger in certain circumstances. And so I didn't understand why that was in my character, right? So I was always trying to understand, like, why am I angry? But then when these experiences came out of my suppressed memory, it was like, okay. And I felt 20 or 30 pounds lighter, and fundamentally, I just don't get as impatient or as frustrated like I used to. And so preparation, meaningful preparation, where you understand some of your mental and emotional blind spots, where you also take the time and the energy to define your future self, right? So what does Shane look like in 6 months and 12 months from now? What does Jonathan look like in 6 to 12 months from now? And really being clear on that, right? So we're talking about health, right? What is your health going to look like? You're going to be vibrant in your physical, spiritual, and emotional health. You're going to be, have great relationships with your friends and your loved ones, and, all of those sorts of great things. And so being very clear and actually taking the time and energy to write that down, right? You're going to be abundant in doing the work that you love to do. All of these sorts of things, and being very specific about what is it that is what your future self actually looks like. And then we can use, once we've got, clarity on our past and what we want to let go and our evolution, right? Not that there's anything wrong with us in this present moment. Of course, there isn't. Each and every one of us are perfect as we are in this moment, but we want to evolve, and we're here to evolve. And so we want to be clear on our evolution. And so taking then the ceremonies, the retreat experience, to actually recognize, if we focus on the embodiment of that future self, the medicine is very good at allowing us to see and sending us the messages we need to hear in order to enable that embodiment of that future self. And when that comes, and those downloads and those lessons start to come, one by one, it's like, wow. because yeah, okay, we've done a little bit of work on some of our mental and emotional blind spots, but the depth of feeling, the experiential aspect of, yeah, just being shown in such clear terms, this is why you're not that, is so humbling, profound, and ineffable. It's impossible to reduce to words.
That sounds amazing. And you bring up a lot of great points as far as preparing for this, because I know, like we mentioned before, like you can't just, book a trip and just go. I think, the preparation aspect is so important. And I'm very much a planner. So for me, best believe when it's time, I am going to have a whole Asana project, all the links, like I'm going to have it laid out, probably printed. So I'm reading it on the way there. So don't you worry. I'll make sure my blind spots are very much checked out before it goes.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And then of course, people have a few ceremonies during the retreat. And then the other aspect and dynamic that's unfortunately far too common is that, and I'll provide some evidence for this in a second, that people feel like $1 million after one of these retreats, right? Especially ayahuasca, because it has such a profound impact, not just on your neurology and your physiology, but just your whole body it feels alive. Like you can feel, I don't know, it's quite common for people to describe the feeling of the vibration in every cell of your body. And you just feel like, wow, it's like, something that's often more left in the bedroom, but through your whole body. People are like, wow, that was such a profound, incredible experience at the end of a retreat. Now you go speak to them a month later, and I'll explain more about the shift and the evolution of our business model as a result. You speak to them a month later, and in essence, nothing has changed in their daily life. So they have this recollection of this deeply profound experience, and A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all of these big life lessons, but they haven't been able to change their daily experience. And now that happens for a large number of reasons. The first is that we've spent decades wiring our neural pathways in the way that we have. And then to expect that one retreat is going to be able to fundamentally rewire that is just a little bit high in the way of expectations, literally high. And so it actually requires a lot of ongoing work, right? You have to actually wake up every morning and, preferably an hour earlier, and to review the commitments that you made to yourself, and to actually say, okay, yesterday, how did I go against this? Or today, how am I going to go against this? This person usually triggers me in these ways. And just to be on watch, right? Physically, watching your emotional body, your emotional physical body, to watch for those moments of contraction where you're gonna revert to that self that that you're going to be moving past, and to stay super conscious of that and commit the time and the energy to go through this more deep integration process, which allows for the sustainment of a more elevated state of consciousness. Because as you do that, and as you release those emotions that arise through your normal triggers, life just becomes so much better and so much easier. One of the dynamics that I've come to recognize and honestly speaking, pick on a little bit is in relation to the reviews on the retreat websites, right? So if you go to any of the retreat aggregator websites, what you see is universally 5-star reviews. Now that tells us a couple things. It tells us, number one, that people are having incredibly profound and positive experiences, which is great. And that's beautiful. We love that. It also tells you that people do not know what good looks like. And this also relates deeply to what I shared with you before, which is that I was attending a number of these retreats around the globe, thinking I was making really great progress, because I felt like I was, because I had no relative measure, right? When you're making personal growth and spiritual progress, it feels really good because it's progress, right? And it's very easy not to make progress in these areas. It's a matter of relativity. If you're, moving one unit, and you're like, yeah, this is great. I'm moving 1 unit at a time. But then you move 100 units, all of a sudden 1 unit doesn't feel particularly relevant any longer. And so I believe that's really what's playing out there on these retreat websites, is that yes, people are having profound experiences, but the range of quality of practitioners in this space is vast and exponentially different, but that's not being recognized in the reviews. So there's a lot of maturation required in the ecosystem such that people can actually be educated to understand what good looks like. And that's fundamentally part of what I'm very excited about bringing into the space, not to judge or criticize, but just so that everyone can lift their game so that more people can have more breakthroughs.
No, I think that's great. And I think for me, after a retreat, I'll probably have my mantras, right? Just as a nice little reminder, put it on your office wall or put it in your bathroom. So when you're getting ready, you don't forget. I think those are really helpful. Just because, it's very easy to get lost in the sauce, right? Like when you go back into your daily life, and all it takes is, I feel like, it's almost like when you look at positive quotes, right? Like for me, I have one right above me that says, live life to the fullest and make a difference along the way. So I think right under that, I would put something positive to remind myself. But I mean, we're all a work in progress. And I mean, you could heal one thing and realize, oh, I have more work that I need to do. And I think that's the beauty of the journey, right? And what we're all trying to seek with plant medicine, especially those that are interested.
Yeah, I love what you said about just having your commitments or your reminders to yourself at the ready. It's funny because in my corporate consulting job, we used to send a lot of our people on trainings. And what tends to happen when people go on training, right, is they go on training for a week or whatever, and then they come back and then they do things the way that they did them before. And so it's challenging to integrate, right? And so, yeah, I love that. I hadn't thought of actually application of that into this context, but I think it's super valuable. It's just whether it's on your PC, it's on your to-do list, right at the top of your to-do list, your little reminders, or in the bathroom, or there in your office. It's a beautiful idea. I love that.
And I'm just a visual person, so I think that's great. Have you heard of the Hatch at all? It's like an alarm clock, but it's like a smart alarm clock.
No, I haven't.
Yeah. So I just had an idea. So I'm like, how cool would it be if you could, because it has like a whole like sleep routine. So when you tap it, you can do like a meditation, and then it leads into like your next routine, which could be like rain music while you're getting ready for bed. So how cool would it be if you can put in an audio and just kind of like, recite like those reminders and mantras. So like you go to bed or wake up to hearing that. Like, I just think those would be really helpful for people.
That's a really great idea. I love that.
Yeah. I mean, just ways to help you stay on track and just to never forget what you've wanted to improve on in your daily life. Yeah. So with the retreats, you do the prep and you go through the whole process of like getting there. So I know we mentioned it on the last call that we had, but so after you return home from, going through this, what does that look like as far as like, do you get like mentored on your return home, or like, how do people like transition back?
Our program is really about, and it's about a number of things. It's about empowering people with a number of tools to improve the quality of their everyday life, right? Because what we don't want is retreat dependency, which is a common dynamic. And so there's a lot of tools that we teach in relation to emotional release, in relation to becoming more conscious of our thoughts, right? And the National Science Foundation released some research that shows we have between, from memory, I think it's like 12,000 and 60,000 thoughts per day. It's some, stratospheric number. And what the research showed is that 95% of those are about yourself, I, me, my, and 80% of those are negative. So the overwhelming majority of your total thoughts are about yourself and not very nice to yourself. So the toll of that, if you think about that multiplied by the number of people on our planet, is incredible, right? Because we're judging ourselves. And yes, of course, we all want to be better. But you can accept yourself as you are and strive to be better without negativity of mind, without guilt for not being perfect, right? None of us are perfect. We are, but we can evolve. So we're perfect and we can be more perfect, right? It's a sort of a paradox, I think, of the universe. But yeah, it's the preparation, the integration is really doing a lot of that sort of mental and emotional work so that you can see your blind spots, and so that you can release those lower level emotions, and so that you can become more cognizant of your self-talk and your judgments. And even the worst of the use of a word like should. Oh, I should have done this. No, you shouldn't have. You did this other thing, and that was okay because that's what you did. And so we're in this paradigm where we are so self-judgmental. And so the moment that we can abstract and look at ourselves not as our minds, but to see our minds as a very powerful tool that we have come to over-identify with, is the moment that we are able to laugh at ourselves and love ourselves for those idiosyncrasies or those, those habit patterns that no longer serve us, that we like to change, but seeing that from a position of love and humor and recognition, rather than from a perspective of contraction and fear and guilt and shame and doubt and all of those lower level emotions.
No, that's a great point. And I'm laughing at myself right now as we're talking about this, because you know what, one of my self-judgment comments I made to myself this week was, gosh, you were just not on top of it because you did not fill out your planner. How ridiculous is that? Like, why does not filling out my planner like make me any less like productive? It doesn't, but that's just something I hold myself so high standard like, and it's ridiculous. I know, but it's things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. It's funny you mentioned that, because writing actually came to me on one of my retreats. I was looking across at this gentleman who was having the most transcendent, incredible experience that you could possibly imagine. And at the same time, I was getting download after download in rapid succession. And I actually, during the ceremony, I wrote 13 pages. And through that process, I came to recognize that writing is really, to some extent, writing is the recognition of a gap, right? Because what you're generally writing is something about, I have to do this, or I want to be that, or it's a gap, right? It's, with this work, it becomes this, I guess it's a playful exploration between that which you embrace as your character versus that which you do decide to focus on to evolve. And that could be anything, obviously. But for that to become very conscious is fun, actually. It's fun.
First of all, amazing that you wrote 13 pages during that. Like, was it legible? You can read it after the fact?
Yeah, well, that's certainly it's certainly an area that I recommend to our clients that they be cognizant of. Is that might feel like a very clear and profound thought at the time, but you're obviously in an altered state of being, and so make sure that you write down enough words, and legibly so that you can actually come back to that lesson. And that's actually, you touched on an interesting point, right? Which is one, when people are in these ceremonies, there's, you're coming in with a set of intentions, right? You've got your future self, but you also want the experience to unfold, right? And so there's a fine balance between trying to be like, all right, this is my future self, show me how I could be this, versus allowing things to be natural and unfold beautifully, and so it's a fine navigation and balance between those two things. Equally, that's the case with writing things down, right? So you have this really profound breakthrough and lesson, maybe one is coming after another. Again, it's about finding the right balance. You could write nonstop for hours and perhaps, not enjoy the profundity of the experience, but equally you could spend 4 to 6 hours being completely carried away by the experience and not write anything down and feel disappointed by that because you can't remember as much as you might have.
That's interesting. Yeah, because I'm more of a typer. So that's why I'm much faster, because this just goes back to not to get into crazy childhood memories of when I was learning how to write. And the way I was taught was, this is where the perfectionist aspect comes from, was I needed to make every single line look exactly like what was depicted. And so I would get in trouble if it didn't look exactly like the way. So then over time, it taught me to I was programmed to write slow, but as long as it turned out perfect, it would look good. And so even throughout high school, anytime I had to write something down, it would be so I would write so hard on the paper that it would imprint on the back. So it was almost like Braille, you can touch. Wow. And so now if I ever write anything down, if I write quick, you can't even read it. It just looks like or whatever. So that's why over the years, when laptops were a thing, I would just type everything out because I can type super fast, over 75 words per minute. So I wonder if is that even, are we allowed to do that? Can we type stuff out? Because I want to remember this stuff. I want to know what the downloads are later. So.
Well, I honestly speaking, I've never seen a laptop in an ayahuasca retreat. That's for sure.
I'd be happy.
I have
to try it.
I have a question for you though, Shane. Yeah. Do you think that there are other areas in your life where your tendency for perfectionism might be holding you back?
Absolutely. I'm sure there's so many things that will come up. It's really hard. It's because I do research on myself all the time through Gene Keys, through human design, through Briggs-Myers. It goes on and on. But yeah, workaholism and perfectionist is always at the top. And so I'm just I wish I could, I need to let that go. I really need to let that part of judgment go. Because I mean, who knows, what else will come up during the experience. But yes, please, I just take it away. I don't want it anymore. I've been doing this for too long. It's time.
Yeah. It's for me, it's been an interesting one because I've come from a consulting background. So it's always, there's a standard that you seek to hold yourself to in relation to client service, right? And now in establishing this business, it's been this interesting exploration because the cost of perfection is very high. 101 things on my website that bother me, like really bother me. And there's so many room for improvements because business is really about iteration, right, and continuous improvement rather than perfection. And so, it's it's a small team, and there's always so many things to do that you have to choose the next best thing as opposed to allowing yourself to be held up by perfection. More broadly, are there any other questions that you have in relation to plant medicine, whether it be the science, the benefits, the crazy stories? Happy to take this conversation in whatever ways that you might enjoy. Definitely
Benefits and crazy stories. I think people would be dying to know about the highlights of all of this, because everyone just thinks oh, is it just gonna be like shrooms? Are you just gonna hallucinate? And so we would love to hear more from someone that's obviously gone through this multiple times and can really enlighten us on those things.
Yeah, I'll kind of, let's jump back and forth between the two, because I think that might be fun, right? To talk a little about benefits, crazy stories, benefits. So start with synchronicities and the fact that there really are no coincidences in this universe, right? To contextualize this, the CIA recognizes this in one of the papers that they have on their website, which describes the nature of the universe as a holographic, right? Which is, so basically the holographic universe is that the part is reflected in the whole and the whole is reflected in the part, which is to say that through self-discovery, we can come to know the whole universe. That's interesting because it just shows you that everything is interconnected very directly and from a very scientific, basis. So some of the synchronicities that can arise as we participate in this work and become more aware of some of these, synchronicities is incredible, right? So I had one where honestly speaking, I was having some challenges setting up a bank account for my business because of the nature of the business, and I'm in Asia, so as you might imagine, there was a few challenges. Now, I did a manifestation meditation, and within 12 hours, someone called me and told me that they had a company that they were closing with a bank account already open, and did I want to buy it? And I didn't even share this problem with this person. They were just like, it just came to me like as a phone call. Hey, would you like to buy this company with this bank account already set up? And I was just like, wow, yes. So I mean, that's one kind of, yeah. I mean, it's not an astronomically odd example, but it was it's a synchronicity. And I have many like this. But in terms of benefits, the science is super compelling, and anyone who's interested in exploring plant medicine, I would recommend looking at some of the science from Johns Hopkins, Harvard, Yale, California Institute of Integral Studies, the very broad number of leading institutions that are doing great work in this space. But ultimately, where I think this work becomes the most interesting is in the shift between, we're talking about elevating consciousness, right? And so what the benefits really begin to accrue as people elevate their consciousness. So at the lower levels of consciousness, people are in emotional states like fear, guilt, shame, envy, apathy, all of those sorts of low level emotions. Now, typically those take hold as depression and are diagnosed as such, and they lead to low levels of action or inaction, generally speaking, in people. You just don't feel motivated to get out and do stuff, right? Now, the next sets of emotions are pride, anger, and what's the third one? Desire. Right. So that's when you're operating from a position of what we call, in that band, we call them kind of still stuck in the ego, very much stuck in ego, which is me, right? Those I want, I am, these are the sorts of emotions that coincide with that. Now, people in those emotional states are generally stuck in hyperactivity, right? So there's a very high number of thoughts. There's me first sort of thinking. Often they're operating in a mode of scarcity. And often they're not particularly thoughtful of others. Then above that, we have emotions like courage, willingness, acceptance, neutrality. And those are more related to productivity and happiness, right? Where you're feeling content, life is good, there's a sense of purpose and belonging, everything's going to work out. That's the general experience that people have in these states. Then we get to kind of the peak of rationality and cognition, which we describe as reason. And for those that are interested in this work, I highly recommend looking at a book there's two books, The Map of Consciousness Explained by Dr. David Hawkins. And he's got another book called Letting Go, which is, I know this sounds corny, but a one-step process to enlightenment. And it really is, it's such profound work. So we're talking about reason, we're talking about the peak of rationality. And that's where, scientific luminaries are often, operating at that level of consciousness. So they're in flow states, they're producing big breakthroughs in relation to our scientific understanding of the nature of the universe, and often, producing large quantities of documentation and thought leadership. And, they're in the big scientific journals, et cetera, et cetera. Now, the next paradigm shift from there is the most difficult to make, because its reason cannot break you through into the spiritual and into the quantum and into the exponential and into the emotions of love and peace and joy as steady states. And so, a lot of what we're trying to do with Behold Retreats is to provide people the tools and the guidance to make that paradigm shift from rationality and strength of mind, right? So the leaders of this world are commonly limited by the paradigm that brought them their success, which is this bit of a twist, which is like, okay, so your strong thinking and your strong personality has brought you to this particular point, but it's not going to bring you to this next point, because being loving and joyful and peaceful in your inner essence is a fundamentally different place that has nothing to do with the mind. It has to do with the body and the spirit. And so breaking through, we call it breaking through into the heart, is just such a paradigm shift, because that's the place where your underlying emotional state is just all caring, all empathetic. Life is perfect as it is. You are living in abundance regardless of what you have, right? And so your way of seeing the world is just so much oriented around the interconnectivity of all things and the true nature of the universe, rather than on the illusion of the separate self, if that makes sense. So that's when we talk about benefits, that's really kind of the paradigm or the framework under which we try to move people up through these levels of consciousness. What's interesting about them is that in reading the materials that are out there for this work, it's very easy to place ourselves. So it's very easy to see, oh, okay, well, I'm kind of here. And so then by reading the language that describes that level of consciousness and reading the language that describes the next level of consciousness, that in of itself is an incredibly powerful tool, because the distinction between these words and those words is the shifts that you need to make in order to reach the next level of consciousness. And so, that's a very powerful practice for those. And you don't need plant medicine to do that, right? Critically, this is plant medicine is a very powerful tool to accelerate personal growth, but this work absolutely can be done. It's just can take a lot longer, and we all like a good shortcut these days. So. That's a little bit of how I talk about the benefits. So I don't know if there's anything that comes to mind for you, Shane, in relation to that.
One random question I have is, like, if you consider yourself an empath, does the process feel any more intense for those that like already naturally feel everything, empathetic towards every living thing? Because that's the only aspect that I'm a little bit nervous about, is because I'm already very in tune with a lot of people and stuff. I'm like, I don't know if I'm just going to just like cry the whole time, or like what is going to happen. So I just wonder, like, if anyone has any insight on that.
It's a great question to ask. So I loosely categorize practitioners in this space into three buckets. And this is oversimplifying, right? But it's helpful to understand. So the first set of practitioners are those who apply medicine, right? So here's some ayahuasca, drink this, and let's see what happens. The second are those who are more trained in either the therapeutic or the somatic aspects, right? So they are often doing work, holding space, as it were, and doing mental and emotional work or somatic work to help you release trauma in the body and that sort of thing. The third category are the unicorns, and these are the people who really understand the energetic aspect, right? And so to relate this back to your question, an empath is often is more of a channel for energy, right? You're picking up on more energy on your average day. And so what is happening when we take these medicines is that they are amplifying our capacity, right? They're amplifying what's in our subconscious, and they're amplifying what we normally have, which is part of why we can see so much more, because there's this massive amplification. And so, I think the short answer is yes, that, for empaths, these experiences can, for everyone, for absolutely everyone, these experiences are unpredictable, right? Even if you ask someone who's been doing this work 30 years in exactly the same way every single night, you ask them what's going to happen tonight, they're going to look at you and say, I don't know. But certainly there is the opportunity there for a lot more to be channeled, I would say, in general, for people like empaths. And so I would say that the importance of expert guidance for an empath is even higher. Of course, it's high for everyone, right? But it's even potentially higher for an empath.
Well, I'm not worried because I'll be in good hands, so it's okay. I was just wondering, because I already knew this about myself, so I just like to just fill up my info bucket here. But that's really great, and I just know, like, just so many people are going to benefit from this. So I just love the fact that this is normalizing. It is becoming more just known globally. So this is something that I feel like is essential. Like, everyone at some point, especially if they really want to elevate, right, their lifestyle and transform, this is definitely one of those things that will get you there. But I definitely want to cover, so the crazy stories. So because this is where it gets really juicy. What are some crazy stories that you know about that has taken place regarding ayahuasca at retreats? Because I'm sure people would just love to know about this.
Yeah. Let me think of a few of them. I'm going to start with one that's more spiritual in nature. So I didn't witness this one firsthand, but one of my mentors who has guided, probably 2,000 people over decades, shared this one with me. So she shared that one of her clients prepared for months and months ahead of time, and was really wanting to clear all of his karma. Now, for people who work in this space, past lives is not some abstract concept. It's recognized and real.
I was going to ask. I know about all
so, lives. And in the space of one ceremony, this gentleman basically cleared all of his present life karma, and then went through hundreds of past lives. And there was breaks for some tea and different stuff during this ceremony. He wasn't interested. He was at work, just on it, clearing. And at the end of the ceremony, he began to describe his experience, and he said, "I'm done. It's time for me to leave this body. It's time for me to leave this planet." And he wasn't sick. He wasn't old. He was just finished. And so it was about a month later, I'm told, that he, in his sleep, he consciously left his body. And yeah, so it's I share that because different people have different perspectives on the story, obviously. But that's something that can happen. Now, where to start in relation to that. I think that it's but this is an extreme example in the sense of progress made, right? But for some people, of course, be looking at that and saying that's not progress, right? They've left Earth, and would probably look upon that negatively. Given the experiences that I've had in this space, I think that, again, there's no coincidences, and as and when these things do happen, they happen as they should.
Yeah, I feel like, but see, that's the thing. When he said he was done, and this is just my perspective, of course, when he said he was done and that he just wanted to leave, in actuality, if he's lived all of these past lives, he's kind of like, my soul's tired now, So in a way, he's like, I've lived enough. so that's how I'm just kind of like, well, I mean, yeah, we all have that choice. So it's like, for him, he feels like I'm just mind blown that he cleared all his karma. Because yeah, I know of a couple people's past lives from like friends, and I'm just like, dang, dude, like that's crazy. And I had a past life regression session before, and I know about some. And I'll just mention one funny fact is, so like my little dog, she's a border collie and Chihuahua mix. And in one of my past lives, one of my past lives was in Scotland. And I was a daughter of someone who used to herd sheep. Like he had a whole farm and everything. And there was a little border collie there. So, and me and my dog are so in tune. I'm telling you, she's my spirit animal. I'm very convinced that we have done life together multiple times, because how is it that I had a past life and this person didn't even know I had a dog like her, that I had a similar dog, and I'm obsessed with Scotland. Now I know why, because I had a life there before. And now like my little dog is with me now. So I'm just kind of like, so even though she's getting older, like she's going to be 9 in February, I'm just kind of, I'm not worried about it, because I'm like, well, we've met before. I wouldn't be surprised if we meet again, like another time. So past lives is a whole another topic that, wow. Yeah, it's crazy. And so that's why I just think the more that people research this type of things, especially with spirituality, almost like things will click. You're just like, well, no wonder why this person I know now seems very familiar, like I've met them before, or why a certain place will feel like home and you don't know why. And it's because you had a past life there. So it's very interesting stuff. So, but that's definitely a wild story. And that you saw it, you met this person firsthand, like, wow, crazy.
I'm sorry. No, I didn't meet them firsthand. It was a story from my mentor shared with me. Yeah.
Oh, got it.
In relation to this, there are also couples out there, right? That this isn't their first life together, which is pretty beautiful and amazing when you think about it. Which is it's cool stuff.
As far as locations, where can people safely do these types of retreats? That's like a common question.
The majority of our retreats we host in Costa Rica or Peru. We also do some in Mexico as well, and also the Netherlands, I should say, but I'm just assuming that you have a largely American audience. So there's interesting dynamics in relation to legality, right? Strictly speaking, my understanding is that this work is not legal in Costa Rica, but there are any number of ayahuasca retreat centers that are openly operating, marketing their services, clearly open for business. And so it's not being regulated. It's not being enforced. So Costa Rica is a great place. It's an amazing place to spend some time. Peru is equally, it's an incredible place to do this work, because that's where I felt called for my first experience. It's high, especially outside of Cusco in the Sacred Valley. You're high in the Andes there. It's near Machu Picchu. You can do some beautiful hiking, whether it's the Inca Trail or the Salcantay. Just amazing hikes up there in the mountains. And so, after a really transformational sort of retreat, I try to recommend to our clients that they don't rush back and head back to the office, right? Go spend a week in the mountains or in the Amazon and immerse yourself and take some more time to really bring it all back and plan out in great detail how you're going to bring this new self back into your old world.
I personally think I will take off like a month, like just so I can slowly transition back and just kind of see like what else will come up. I mean, what do you recommend? Like after you go to retreat, like should people take off a little bit of time off from their regular like work?
Ideally, yes. Ideally, yes. I'll share with you another story. So ayahuasca first appeared in my life when a friend of mine, I think she was like 20, went on a retreat, a month-long retreat. And she was, unfortunately, she had a really traumatic childhood. She was shy, always unsure of herself, And a month later, she came back as a transformed person. She was motivated, vibrant. She was organizing picnics and surfing and trips to this and this and that. And the other was just like, wow, who is Sophie? Like, we don't even recognize her for the differences that she's made to her own life. There is no hard and fast answer, right? So I think if it is possible for people to take a month, right? And I think it's becoming more possible for more of us these days to be able to have some flexibility in our lives, right? And thank you, COVID. Many downsides, but one upside is like, okay, now we want flexibility in our lives, which is really beautiful. So for someone to be able to go say, this is dream, right? I'm talking for someone to be able to do a week-long retreat, take a week off, right? And go do some hiking and some other stuff like that. And then, and people will know the right answer for themselves, but then to be able to do another retreat after something like that, I think would be super, super powerful as a way of doing this work. It's quite common for people to go on a retreat and decide they want to stay there, right? And so they call home and be like, all right, I'm going to stay here for another couple of weeks and do a little bit more work, take some more time off first and kind of integrate, and then do some deeper work and then integrate and then go back. And so there isn't a one size fits all in relation to this. People feel what's right intuitively for them. And that's always the best approach. This is work that ultimately is all about listening to yourself and the wisdom that is from within. And it's all there. Like every bit of information that ever was, ever will be, is there within you, for you and for everyone else, which is the incredible piece about this work.
Amazing. Oh my gosh. As we're talking, I'm just like imagining like what the whole trip will be like just the imagery of it all. It's just so exciting. I just can't wait for more people to hear about this and just kind of see like, yeah, where can I use this type of work and like apply it? Where can I fit this into my schedule? Because number one, especially right now during COVID, is taking care of ourselves and our mental state. And I think this is just like another form of self-care that I definitely want to implement, like maybe annually, who knows? Any other highlights that you think are like a common like asked question that people would want to know about?
Safety, I think, is probably a common one, right? People are worried about losing their minds, right? Most of us value our minds to a great extent. And so I guess in relation to that, there's, we spoke a little bit about the trauma, which most of us have. The second dynamic is the overthinking, right? So I'm pleased to share that my brain now doesn't have thoughts unless it's purposefully asked to. So there's no more thoughts in my head, which is very peaceful, to be honest. And you still have, of course, full capacity. It's just that it doesn't talk to itself when not invited to. And the third is overwhelm. Right. So modern life is complex. So our brains, our prefrontal cortex is overwhelmed by the complexity that it's invited to engage with each day. So whether that be, decisions at a restaurant or driving or reading the news, or there's so much that we can't possibly make sense of it or take it all in. And so what our brain does in that context sounds healthy, but can actually be quite damaging. So what the brain does, given the overwhelm, is it begins to take shortcuts in our thinking because it can't cope with the complexity. And so it has to take shortcuts as a sort of energy efficient adaptive response, right? Now that sounds good, but it actually begins to pattern our thinking and behavior in ways that no longer serve us. So we begin to lose the neuroplasticity of our minds, which is the creativity of our thinking, which is the the ability to be open, right? And we all have people in our lives which have become deterministic in their thinking, right? So if you present them with some new piece of information, you already know how they're going to respond. And that's the tragedy, right? Because that means that they've lost the neuroplasticity. And so, yeah, these plants help us regain that. But then kind of relating that back to safety, these are profound and powerful experiences, and different energies can come and go in relation to our trauma, in relation to our energetic state, in relation to the overwhelm and the healing that needs to take place for us to realign mind, body, heart, and soul. And so it's important to be with expert guidance as we're rewiring our neural pathways, right? So one of the things I share with some of our clients is like, look, you are fundamentally rewiring your neural pathways. Think of this like neurosurgery. That is what's going on. And so think about and do your research and select your experience just like you would thinking about going into neurosurgery. This work is no joke. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, like by orders of magnitude. Like it's so much harder than working until 3 a.m. in the morning and waking up at 7 and doing that over and over again. Like that's a walk in the park compared to looking at what probably exists in the depths of the subconscious and managing through that. So yeah, I think as you spoke about at the top of the call, in the Netflix stuff, they show the good, they show the ugly. I think that's totally fine that they overemphasize the bad stuff, because it actually cannot be overemphasized. This is hard work, and people say, oh, statistically they're overemphasizing the negative. But they're like, yeah, but maybe you're that statistic. Maybe so it's important for people to understand the risks and the importance of expertise. And it also actually, just thinking back to that Netflix documentary, it was some time before they recognized that lady was having a seizure. And that's because there's 30 people all sitting in a circle, dressed in white, best of luck. And it's like, are you kidding me? This person is going through one of the most challenging and profound experiences of their life, and you're just feeding them something and hoping that they have the best of luck. Like, are you kidding me? And so, for those people who are in a position to do so, I really encourage them to do this work privately, where you've got 1 or 2 facilitators and healers solely focused on your journey, your experience. And, the science that you see that's coming out from these leading institutions, that's the context. There's 2 people looking after 1 person going through their journey. And by comparison, a whole bunch of people, having fun during the week, doing whatever out at bars and clubs, and then jumping on a plane to go do an ayahuasca retreat. No, please don't. So yeah, safety.
I remember you said like, you don't do like something like shrooms when you're going to go to a retreat, like coming up, like that's going to throw something off and that doesn't help prepare. So I know I have some books to read or listen to on Audible, and just continue to prepare. Like I over prepare, so it's okay. But yeah, I just think I'm excited to hear of if any of the listeners go through with this and they share their experiences. That's like a whole nother episode, because I would love to know anyone that's willing to share like what they went through. But all this sounds so amazing, and I'm sure like we could chat about this forever, because it's just something that I feel like, as long as there's more awareness about it, the more that it'll get utilized and more lives will change, and it's just a domino effect. So I'm just super excited.
Absolutely.
Everyone to hear all this great information. So where can our listeners find you online and learn more about Behold Retreats and everything that they can apply to their healing journey?
Yeah, so we're on behold-retreats.com. We're on Twitter and Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn as well, so people can find us there. We have been consistently putting up our prices, and that continues to serve us very well. And so I wanted to extend a sharp discount for your listeners, because it's just, it's in the spirit of the great connection that we've had. But we're going to the moon with this work. So we're just about to open a program for 100K for executive clients, and that's it's going to be much deeper, much more intensive, so that we can really move people to the very highest levels of consciousness very quickly. Because as people do that, it's my journey has been, in the consulting world, if I'm to be honest, it was a journey of me, promotion, all this nonsense. And now the motivation is not monetary. The motivation is not personal. The motivation is not any of that. It's about getting this world to a better place for future generations, like as quickly as we can, because there's a few things that we can evolve towards that will make our lives better. So yeah, people can find us there. I'm always happy to have a chat. I've got a great team that's always happy to have a chat. We've got a much more in-depth video on our website, which explains a lot more of the science, a lot more of the benefits, a lot more of the challenges that can arise and the mistakes that people are making in greater detail. So if you're motivated to explore this space, whether it's with us, whether it's with someone else, would encourage you to check that video out, predominantly because it's a culmination of 3 years of mistakes that I was making. And so saving people from years of mistakes is one of our primary motivations.
Oh man, I love that. And this is all very inspiring, and I'm sure more and more people are going to want to check this out. So, and by the way, your website is great. Don't worry about it. There's not 101 mistakes on there. I have to say it's fine.
Thank you. Thank you.
So everyone, please check out Behold Retreats. And it was such a pleasure to have Jonathan on the show. And you can always find more information in the description box below. But thank you all for tuning in, and we'll catch you all next time. Thank you, everyone.